This is Carol from the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. This is the August Adult Cardiac Surgery Database webinar. We're going to get started here. On the line with me, I have, from IQVIA, I have Melanie Bent and Joe Brower, who will be leading the discussions for the IQVIA portion, along with a couple of their co-workers. And then on the STS side, I have myself and Jane Hahn, Leanne Jones, and Melinda Offer, and we'll be handling some of the questions. Oh, and I see Addie Dolan's joined too. Hi, Addie. We'll be going through some of handling the questions for the database side. So just a quick run through of the agenda. We'll do housekeeping. We're going to talk about a couple areas that we've been seeing increased FAQs coming in, which include the NYHA classification, the coronary grid, the arterial and venous conduit, how to capture those correctly, update on the aorta devices, and then we'll have a couple updates, the AQO, IQVIA, and a vendor update, and then time for Q&A. Please use the question and answer function to submit your questions, and we'll get to them as soon as we finish up with the presentation. Again, this is going to be a little bit packed, so if you have, we might have to go over a few minutes. I don't know for sure, but we'll try to get through it on time and get to your questions. There will be polling on this webinar, so if you're able to log in online, please do so. The version 4.20 data specs, the risk models are being built at the vendors, and we received the testing files for the vendors from DCRI, so we should have those out to the vendors within the next day or two. The August training manual has been posted, and the surgeon worksheets are also posted. Please check it out. There's quite a few surgeon worksheets that are posted online and available for you. Let's see here. All right, important dates. We have our monthly webinar is today. Tomorrow we're going to have a MIPS webinar. MIPS is the merit incentive payment for the surgeons. And MIPS is something that the surgeons who are STS members can participate in for free, and we submit their outcomes for reimbursement for them. Other surgeons, there's a small fee associated, but if you're interested in learning more about MIPS or the program, or you have questions, you're already participating, your surgeons are already participating, there's a webinar posted, webinar link posted on the website, and I welcome you to join. We have an adult cardiac user group call on the 19th at 2 p.m. Central. On August 21st, Harvest 3 closes. That will include OR dates through 6/30/2020. That will be a star rating. So please do your best to get your data in cleaned up and ready to go. The portal closes, the Harvest submission closes at August 21st at midnight Eastern time. And then we have our monthly webinar is going to be on September 2nd at 2 p.m. Central. All right, everybody get your polling fingers ready. That's a joke. This is the NYH classification section, class NYH sequence 915. In version 2.9, which was the version just prior to this, the NYH classification was a child of heart failure. So you had to select heart failure, yes, and then the classification would open and you could document it here. In version 4.20.2, we pulled this out as a standalone field, so there's no parent for the classification of NYH score. The reason we did that is because we're trying to collect the functional classification for patients who may not necessarily have heart failure, but oftentimes have valvular disease. Most specifically, usually it's mitral valve disease, who present with symptoms similar to heart failure, and the surgeons are giving them classifications. So we wanted to collect those classifications, realizing that not all of these patients actually were diagnosed with heart failure. So the classification for NYH is pulled out separately. And I'm just going to go through a couple, through the FAQs and some of the common answers that Melinda has been giving out. We're capturing it on all patients. So it's regardless if your patient has heart failure or not, we're still going to capture the NYH classification. If it's not documented, then code not documented. The NYH classification is being documented on patients without a without heart failure, just because the NYHA classification is documented does not mean the patient has heart failure. So although you may be able to answer this classification NYHA, does not mean that you would answer yes to heart failure. These fields are not dependent on one another. So you just have to make sure that if you have to have documentation of heart failure other than just the NYHA classification to code yes to heart failure at sequence 911. If a patient has heart failure class 2 and CCS angina functional class 4, how do you code that? Heart failure classification and the NYH score are different than the CCS angina functional classification. Heart failure is specific to heart failure symptoms. The NYH classification is specific to those functional symptoms that the patient may exhibit. It's much different than the angina classification for the CCS score. So they are not the same thing. You have to, the NYHA classification and the angina classification are two different things. So remember that if they're two different scores, they do not rely on one another. You have to document for this classification NYHA, it's the heart failure classification or the NYHA classification. Now, if your surgeon documents something that says heart failure class 2, that doesn't necessarily mean the patient has heart failure. Sometimes surgeons will interchange the terms NYHA and heart failure as a class 2 or class 3, whatever it may be. You need to clarify within either the documentation or reaching out to your surgeon that the patient has heart failure if you're not able to find it documented anyplace else in the chart other than associated with the class. I'm going to go to some questions now, some polling questions. Let's see if I can open these guys up. And just a couple reminders, you're not going to assign or code the NYHA classification based solely on documented symptoms. You must have a documented NYHA classification. So just because somebody might be documented that they have shortness of breath or they have a hard time walking upstairs, doesn't mean that you go and make that diagnosis and code that diagnosis. The classification has to be documented with the levels specified, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, I'm going to open up the polling questions. The first question is, your patient, the chief complaint, this is what you find in the notes. The chief complaint is that the patient has shortness of breath and palpitations. Patient states for the past week she has noticed that she becomes very short of breath, especially when she is exerting herself. She is unable to lay flat at night as well. No NYHA classification is found in the patient's chart. So how are you going to code this for class NYH? Everybody was listening. Okay, it looks like you guys got this. So there's the first one. You guys, most everybody coded this as not documented. The reason why you code that as not documented is because the classification needs to be specified in the chart. It was not, so not documented is the correct answer. Okay, hold on one second. Let me get to the next one. I have to stop sharing so I can go to the next poll. So the next question is, if it is documented that the patient is asymptomatic, what do you code for NYH sequence 915? And the choices are class 1, 2, 3, 4 are not documented. Maybe I made these too easy. Okay, we're going to stop it there. Looks like everybody, most people have gotten that one. Again, that's not documented. Asymptomatic, even though the patient doesn't have any symptoms. So I guess, Melinda, do you agree that would be not documented, correct?
Yes, because we have to have the provider document the class.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then the last one for this section is for patients who are documented as a NYHA classification 2 to 3, what should be coded for the classification score? And here's a hint. You're going to indicate the patient's worst dyspnea or functional class coded as the NYHA classification documented by the provider within the past 2 weeks. Oh, I have to launch it. Sorry about that. So we have a patient that's coded 2 or 3. How are we going to code that one? All right. I'm going to stop it there. I think we're getting it, Melinda.
That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good job, everybody. Okay, on to the next section. This is the coronary grid section. This is going to be in section H underneath the cath and hemodynamic cath and echo section. And this is where we have the number of diseased vessels, and we're coding these vessels if they're stenosed. We're capturing them if they're greater or equal to 50%, and then if they are, then we're going to get a little bit more in detail with the LAD, RAMU, CIRC, and RCA distribution. So here's what we've been getting some questions on to kind of help you all out. First, once diseased, always diseased. Okay, well, what if that vessel was stented and there's no stenosis in it? Doesn't matter. It's still considered disease. Still remember, once diseased, always diseased. You would code as diseased at sequence number 1170, NUM-DISV, which is here. You're going to code the current level of stenosis in the vessel delivering blood to the myocardium. If less than 50%, code no to corresponding field. So what that means is that you have this could be for 2 different ways. You could have a stented vessel. You're going to code the current level of stenosis at the time of surgery. So if that vessel you had a cath that was done 6 months prior, they stented a vessel from 99% down to 0%. They opened it up, it was patent. And then the patient comes back 4 months or 5 months later, they have another cath pre-valve procedure, and that vessel is still patent. You're going to code whatever was closest to the time of the procedure, the flow in the actual vessel. If that vessel was bypassed, if you have say you have a proximal LAD that was 100% occluded and the patient had a previous coronary bypass and they did a little graft around that proximal area of the LAD, the vessel that is delivering blood to the myocardium is now that graft. So that's where you would code your stenosis from. That's where you would code the stenosis from. So you would have your, it's the vessel that's being used to deliver blood to the myocardium. I'm going to ask a couple questions here, and I'm going to run through this first. Okay, let me pull up the other polling. All right, this patient had a stent placed, 70% proximal LAD prior to aortic valve replacement. They had a stent placed 60% CIRC prior to the aortic valve replacement. So one patient's coming in for an aortic valve replacement. They had 2 stents placed, one that was in the proximal LAD, one in the CIRC. At the time of the aortic valve replacement, the proximal LAD and CIRC have patent stents, which means 0% stenosis. No other coronary artery stenosis was found. So how do you capture the number of diseased vessels? That's right. So it looks like, so remember, the number of diseased vessels is any vessel, if it was diseased at any time, is considered diseased. Once diseased, always diseased. And diseased, we're talking about stenosis that is greater than 50%, right, Melinda? When we're looking at vessels that are considered diseased for that field?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So doing pretty good here. We got 93% so two vessel disease, and that's right. We had a stent in the proximal LAD and a stent in the CIRC. Both had considerable disease. So we're going to capture those as diseased vessels. So 2 is the correct answer. Okay. Next question is, how are we going to capture the LAD disc stent? So this is, maybe it will be helpful if I did this for you all. Hold on one second, I'm gonna pull up the form here. I'm gonna try. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the LAD disc stent. So we're in the we're in this section here, section H. And remember, this patient now had the 2 previous vessels. Prior to their AVR, they did not have any stenosis in either of those vessels. We're capturing the flow at the time of the procedure, the current procedure. So for how are we going to capture this previously 70% stenotic LAD distribution? Are we going to code this yes or no? And I think that's helpful to see both of them there. Oops, sorry about that. And remember, this is going to be at the time of the AVR. Okay. So this one we had a little bit harder time on. So remember, we had 2 stents placed prior to the AVR. The patient, this could have been a long time ago, a couple of years ago. Patient now needs an AVR. They do a cath and they see that the proximal LAD and the circ, they're totally fine. There's no stenosis in those. So we want to capture the stenosis at the time of the current procedure. What is that the vessel that's delivering blood to the myocardium? What is the percent stenosis in that vessel at the time of the procedure? And I'm going to stop the poll now. I'll show you the results here. 25% of the people said yes, we would capture that we had a stenotic vessel, and 71% no, 4% said NA. So we do know that the only way that we would capture this as being NA is if we didn't have any record of these being studied again. But we do have a record. We have a cath report that says that there was no percent stenosis in either of these vessels at the time of the procedure. So the correct answer for this question is no, we do not have any disease within those vessels at the time of the AVR. Okay, next question is, if the same scenario, and then how are we going to capture this is a trick question. How are we going to capture the LAD distal stent percent stenosis? And remember, this is a trick question. So our choices for this are 50 to 69, greater or equal to 70, or this is a good trick question. Good try, Carol, but I can't get to this because there's the answer to the LAD distal stenosis is no. Okay. All right, good job, everybody. That's right. It was a trick question, and you can't get to that field because for this LAD distribution stenosis, we coded this no because there was 0% stenosis at the time of the AVR procedure in that vessel. Okay, and then the next question, how are we going to capture circ distal stent, which is this field here? And this is my last polling question. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to let you all figure it out. Our choices are 0%, or I'm sorry, our choices are yes, no, or NA for this field here. Looks like you guys have it. Do you have anything to add to this section while they finish out their polling, Melinda?
I don't think so. I think you've done a great job with it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully this is helpful. Okay, we're gonna end the poll here, and 88% said no, that is the correct answer. We're not able to fill in the circ stent, or I'm sorry, we are able to fill it in, but the correct answer is no, because at the time of the AVR, there was no stenosis found in the circ, it was patent. So the correct answer to that is no. So great job on those. Thank you for entertaining my need to do polling. Next slide. All right, we're going to talk about, this is the clarification for the anastomosis section. Maybe it'll be better if was it helpful to see both screens on there? Melinda, is that helpful?
It is. It's just a little small, so it makes it hard to see.
Okay, I'm just going to show this for a second so folks can follow along. We're going to go down into the cabbage section, section J, and we're going to talk about this first part here where we start off with internal mammary use starting at sequence 2626, and we're going to work through 2640. So, sorry about that. So what we're going to talk about is how to capture the anastomoses for this section. First, I want to give a quick anatomy lesson. Proximal means the part of the graft. So this is the graft. This is your RCA. I think this is your circ, and this is your LAD over here, or something close to that. I don't know. But this is a graft going down from your aorta into this vessel here, into your coronary vessel here. It's bypassing this blockage. This is the proximal portion. This is the distal portion. Okay, so what we look for in this section when we're talking about how to capture the distal anastomoses, the field says, there's two fields. One field is total number of distal anastomoses with arterial conduits, and the other field we count is total number of distal anastomoses with venous conduits. So when we're talking about distal anastomoses, we're talking about the distal part of this graft. What is this distal part of the graft made up? Oftentimes this graft can be completely artery or completely vein. So not a big deal. If it's a completely arterial graft, you would just code this, you would capture this as an artery graft. The distal portion is an artery graft. However, sometimes these grafts, they might not be long enough, so they have to add on a little extra piece of graft material to make it reach to its target destination. It could be made up of the same material, or it could be made up of something different. So it could, if this is an artery graft and say it stops here, they need a little bit of extra vein to reach down here, then the distal portion of this graft is considered a vein graft. So it would be a composite graft, and we would have an artery vein composite graft. The distal portion of the graft is vein, and that's what we would use to count those fields where we have the distal anastomoses with venous conduit counts, the total number. The reason why we would count this graft as a vein graft, even though it has an arterial portion and a vein portion, is because the distal portion of this graft is how this vein is going to act. So artery grafts and vein grafts, they act differently when they're used in bypasses. They act differently. The distal portion of the graft is how that vein is going to act, and I believe the reason is because of the blood. So the blood flow is coming from the aorta down the graft. It has resistance here when it's meeting the other where it's targeting into, or it's flowing into. So this distal portion has the most pressure on it when it does that, and that's how that graft is going to act. So we're going to get in here and we talk about internal mammary used, and we talk about the total number of distal anastomoses and distal venous conduits. Anytime you use an internal mammary, if it's for the entire graft or if it's just a portion of the graft, you're going to capture it at 2626. This field is used in your outcomes, in your star ratings for I believe in your composite measure. So regardless of where you use an internal mammary, you're going to capture this as yes. Internal mammary are artery grafts. So it's going to be a little bit tricky when you get down here to this question where it says total number of distal anastomoses with arterial conduits. So remember, we just talked about the distal portion of the graft. If you have an internal mammary and you're going down to the LAD and you can't quite make it all the way down to the LAD and the surgeon puts in a little piece of vein graft to make it down there, that graft is now counts as a venous graft. So here, count any graft with distal portion of graft that is artery. This could be your internal mammary artery. This could be your radial artery. That number is going to go here. The distal portion of that graft has to be artery. Now we're going to get down to this distal anastomoses with venous conduit. You're going to count any graft with the distal portion of the graft that is venous. So again, that can be a straight vein. It can be a complete saphenous vein graft that the proximal and distal portions are from the same piece of vein, and that's going to be a venous graft. You could have an internal mammary that has, again, a little portion of saphenous vein graft tacked onto the end of it to connect it distally, and that is also going to be counted as the distal anastomosis with the venous conduit. Or you could have, a piece of vein that's too short and then they, put two pieces of vein together and that's a vein-vein composite. The distal portion of that graft is still vein. So you have to look at the distal anastomoses, what plugged into that coronary artery. When I say coronary artery, I'm talking about the main coronary arteries here, so your RCA. What plugged into that coronary artery? Was it a piece of vein graft or was it another piece of artery? Was it the internal mammary artery or was it a radial artery graft that plugged into this? Again, proximal and distal, or proximal and distal. So anything to add to that, Melinda?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. And then we're going to get into this is the aorta devices. On one of our last calls, we had talked about this model number field was set up as a text field. And I was putting together a list of devices so you could type in the harvest, a code here. And it's still a text field. You still have to type something in. I don't know if some vendors do or some vendors don't have a populated list to help you. But what we're looking for, it's going to be, this is what the list will look like. It's going to have, this left-hand column is going to be harvest codes. You can just type those in over here underneath this model number. I'm going to post this today or tomorrow on the website underneath the additional resources, so you have it there in a PDF format. Instead of you having to type in this whole long number, you're just going to type in 804 and it will associate it with this number when we run the analysis. So I'll put instructions on the website. Essentially, this was a text field. You were typing in the model number or model name, or we were getting all kinds of crazy things in this model number field because it's a text field. So instead of typing in a whole long name, look for it on this list that'll be posted, and you're going to use these harvest codes. This list is going to be posted on the website. I'll show you where. Under registries, and then STS National Database, Adult Cardiac, and we'll post it under version 4.20. It'll be posted, gonna have a little delay, I guess. It'll be posted under the additional resources down here, probably at the bottom. So look for that there when you're working on aorta cases, and use that to fill in the model numbers for the devices. And then the surgeon worksheets are all posted here in PDF, so you can print them, and in Word version so you can edit them as needed. I told you this was going to be a long one, didn't I? Let's see, what else do we have to talk about? Direct data entry. If you're interested in that or would like more information, please email Jane. She's at stsdb@sts.org. And then AQO update. Adult cardiac AQO will be held on Thursday, October 1st. We will be virtual this year. A lot of really great presentations. The surgeons are excited to present to you and really answer your questions, and some case presentations and things like that. For those of you who have not been in AQO in the past, unfortunately, we are virtual this year. Hopefully, it'll be a good meeting, but this is what it looked like. The top right-hand corner, that's what AQO, that's how many people usually attend. It's a big meeting. We have a lot of fun there and a lot of great time to network and learn together. We do have early bird pricing in place. It's half the price. For members, it's $75. For non-members, it's $100. If you have already made your payment, and these prices just went into effect earlier this week, if you already made a payment, our finance department will be reaching out to you and issuing refunds. So there's that. And if you're interested in more than one, that's $200, which is half off, $200 to attend all four. If you have any questions, please email Emily Conrad at econrad@sts.org regarding AQO. And then AQO 2020, hopefully we'll be in Denver. That's the hope. And now I'm going to hand it over to Melanie and Joe for their IQVIA update.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to be starting us off with our update from August 1st, which went live this weekend. Just going to cover some of the changes and fixes that went through. First of all, the first message there, the following fix, the general update information. The IQVIA platform was updated from 1.30 to product version 1.31. That shouldn't have any visible impact, but just to let you know that the IRP, as we call it, platform itself was updated. The first bug fix listed here has to do with direct data entry. For DDE users, the MELD score data element should have been automatically calculating based on the entries for bilirubin, INR, dialysis, and creatinine level, but that was not working correctly. And so now, since this past weekend, that should now auto-calculate once those elements have been entered. Next, we have some updates for the data quality report, STS 3423. Prior to this weekend, if you had clicked on one of the rows for your data quality report to isolate an individual patient, that wouldn't work. It would highlight the entire set of warnings for you, but you wouldn't be able to click on a specific record to show only that record's warnings in the record level validation at the bottom of the screen. And so that has been updated, so you should now be able to drill down that way. STS 2976. For this one, the data quality report was giving warning messages saying that AFib procedures data was missing, even in situations where those data elements were not applicable. And so that has been fixed, so those warnings should not appear any longer for future uploads. Next bug has to do with the harvest summary report, STS 3241. So for this one, the harvest summary report was incorrectly showing warning messages for the urgent or emergent reason data element. And it was saying that cardiogenic shock was not answered yes, even though it was. And so for the harvest summary report, that should now be updated and you should no longer see those invalid warning messages. All right, next we have some fixes for the dashboard report, starting with STS 1923. So we made some updates so that the PROC ID configuration for version 2.81 data is now reflected accurately. Prior to this weekend, our system had been pulling from had been referencing an outdated source document for the information on the PROC IDs. And so now for those version 2.81 records, that should now reflect accurately on your dashboard. And then STS 2290. We went over this, I think, in one of our previous calls as a upcoming fix. So what was happening is the nasopharyngeal answers for the dashboard report were for some reason being lumped in with the tympanic data. And so you weren't getting accurate results for either of those two elements. And so the fix this weekend should separate those out. And so that both tympanic and nasopharyngeal will now show you the accurate and correct information for those two data elements. The next section here is for missing variable report fixes. STS 2486. We simply made an update to allow the missing variable report to include your version 4.20.2 data elements. So you should now see those when you run that report since this weekend. STS 3162, the MVR was showing double the case number in the total section of the report. And when you would click on it, in the example in the title here, for example, it was saying 6 out of 81 missing, but then you click on it and it would only show 3 cases in the bottom section. And so we've updated the report so that now it will correctly give you the total at the top and the matching number of cases in the bottom. STS 3186, the missing variable report was showing missing for a discharge date for patients who had expired, and that should no longer occur. And then STS 3226, we have fixed an issue where some users were experiencing the percentages in the report were way off, showing well above 100%, which is obviously incorrect. And so those situations should now have been resolved. All right, next slide. I think, Melanie, you're going to hop in for this one.
Yes, just wanted to give an update in regards to enhancements that were released also during the August 1st weekend. We now will, of course, support the enrollment of the MIPS program for the 2020 year. The electronic consent form is available. So providers and provider delegates can now submit their consent to participate in the program. So we will be, of course, covering more information in the MIPS webinar that STS will be hosting tomorrow. Another update that occurred on the August 1st weekend is related to the uploader interface. You may have noticed that there is some guidance text that has been added to the interface. That guidance is specific to only the IQVIA direct data entry users, just to remind them that once they make the transition formally to IQVIA as the vendor, that they should not submit uploaded files. They can no longer do the uploader feature. So they should be making any updates or additions to the platform using only the direct data entry. So that is the update that happened there. And the next slide, it may go back to you, Joe. I'm not sure. Let's see what the next slide has. Carol, you're up. Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah.
I was answering questions.
No. Multitasking over there. Okay. All right, Joe.
Yeah, so a couple issues that are currently under review that have come up very recently. We're looking into an issue with the uploader where version 4.2 records have some new data elements that are what we call multi-select, which means you're able to choose multiple options. So you can say it's this one and put a checkbox. And so there's an issue where the uploader is not properly processing that data. So what's happening is each choice you're making is being separated by a comma, but our uploader is not properly set up to process that, where a comma is supposed to separate the results. And so we are working on a fix for that. So if you are experiencing that, just please note that we are aware of that issue, and once we get a fix out, that will be communicated to you. And then STS 3267, we have identified an issue where when you're trying to update an existing record. So let's say you have a record in the system already and you realize that you have an incorrect time that you need to fix for one of the data elements for that existing record. So you export a new DAT file and you send the update through. We've noticed that the time values are not correctly updating in the system. And so that does only pertain to data elements that have a time involved, and it's just the time data that's not being properly updated. So just be aware of that, and we'll be following up with more information once we have that resolved for you as well.
And just to jump in on that, just know that, again, we do look at these two as priority, and we are looking at issuing a patch update for these two specific items. So our development team is actively working on getting these resolved. And of course, we will give notification to when these are available. So just know that these are priority. We do understand that especially with 3267, we want to make sure that that is in place prior to the harvest close. So again, we will make sure to notify once that is available. And this one is me, I think. Yep. So let me discuss what's coming. So August 8th, we do have another scheduled release, and this is specific for enabling a new report, which is the risk score match report. So this report, of course, was available in your previous PDF DQR, where you were able to see a comparison for the predicted mortality values that were being calculated. So the values that your software vendor is generating, once that is uploaded, we then can then provide a comparison of what is generated within the database. So we will be providing those results via this report. So initially, when you are able to access this, so of course after the 8th release, the report will only give you the comparison information that's related to data version 2. We are continuing to enhance the report to include the 4.20.2. We did receive the updated risk information, risk model information from DCRI, so we also have to make those updates that's applicable for that version, and we also will be making updates for the 2.81 version. So I do have a screen capture of what the report will look like, and we will be posting within the library reference information for this report for you to review also. But for now, let's go ahead and let's take a look. I believe the next slide we'll be able to take a look at what that report looks like. I do apologize, it's probably a little bit small because I wanted to give you the different views, but you will be able to access this report using the operation or navigating to the operational reports menu. Once you select that option, you will see a new entry that is called risk or match report. And so once you select that, you will be navigated to a parameter page that will give you the data version option, which will be 2.9, and that will generate all of the records for you and give you the comparisons. And then once the report loads, you'll have a summary level view, and then you'll have the ability to drill down into a detailed level view. So you'll notice on the second screenshot, all of the percent match.
Melanie, are you there?
We lost Melanie.
Okay, she'll be back. Joe, are you there?
I am, but I am not prepared to speak to this report. So
All right,
might need
well, let's wait for Melanie to come back. We could take some questions while she's finishing up there.
No.
Jane, are you there, Melanie?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, there you are.
I don't know
Yes,
what
ma'am.
happened. I heard you. I don't know what happened. Okay.
Oh, go
What
ahead.
about now? Okay. What about now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So hopefully this is my last slide. So So you'll see that the percent match, all of those are highlighted currently. So it's going to give you all of the results down in the bottom portion for each of those cells that are highlighted. I also want to point out that the items that have been identified as no match will be highlighted in a red cell. And so you're able to sort, if you wanted to view all of the items all of the records that have not, that have a status of no match, you're able to sort on that column. So just know that each of the columns are sortable, but I know I had a question in regards to whether or not that result column, could you sort by match or no match, and you can. And then of course the last slide is just showing that if you wanted to review a single item in regards to, for the example I have here, operative mortality valve only, you just select that cell and it will give you the results down below. So you're able to review that information. And then of course, you're able to review the participant value, so the value that was generated within the file that was uploaded, you're able to see that value, and then you would see the IQVIA value. And then of course, the last column is the match. But that's basically the risk score match. Again, we'll have a overview document so that you can have details to review, but that will be available after the August 8th release. And I think that's it. Let's take a look at the next, going into the support slide.
Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Joe. So this is our support plan. Email ststechsupport@IQVIA if you're having problems or questions about the uploader or any of the IQVIA platform functionality, any of the reporting dashboards on IQVIA website. You could reach out to them at ststechsupport@IQVIA.com. If it's a vendor issue, you would reach out to your vendor. So issue within your vendor software that you're having a difficult time with. Prior to submitting it over to IQVIA, that's where you would reach out to your vendors. Or you could always reach out to STS, reach out to me at STS, ccrone@sts.org, or the STSDB@sts.org. And then here's my information, database operational questions. If you need to change contacts or you want you're changing vendors or need to add on a surgeon, you would email stsdb@sts.org or look for the forms on the website. And we have just about 10 minutes here. I'm going to run through some questions. I have been trying to answer questions after we get off webinars via email. I don't know if I'll be able to do that this time, but let's see how many we can get to. Melanie, this one's for you. Melanie and Joe, will we be able to archive the dashboard without actually accessing each report? One step to print the entire dashboard.
We do have that as an enhancement. At the moment, it is that you do have to access each individual report. I will say that for the upcoming risk-adjusted reports, we will, because of the fact that we did get a lot of those requests in regards to being able to do a single print, we will have it there, but we are looking at enhancing that print capability on the existing dashboard. So that's still on the list for us to be able to get to.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Jane. Do surgeons need to re-sign consents for MIPS? Can you confirm who is signed up? Is it just adult or thoracic as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Hi, Nancy. Surgeons do need to re-sign consent forms every year for MIPS. In 2020, we'll be offering MIPS for adult cardiac surgeons only. The consent form will be available in the IQVIA platform, and Melanie will be doing a pretty thorough demo of that during the webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. Something different this year as opposed to last year is that MIPS consents can also be accessed by data managers, so you'll be able to submit them for your surgeons on their behalf. So please feel free to join that. I know there's another question about MIPS later on in the Q&A, so just to address that, no, your surgeons do not need to listen to the live session. We will have it recorded. We realize that 2 p.m. Central is likely OR time for your surgeons, so we'll be sure to record it and post it on the website. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Jane. Next question is antibiotics discontinuation question regarding, according to the manual, IC infection must be present to code exclusion. Is there any other condition that can be present to code exclusion if an MD documents continue antibiotics, swan tubes remain, but patient has no infection, fever, cultures? Can you code exclusion? And Marie, I'm just going to ask if you could please submit your question into the FAQ, because this one seems, we don't want to give you a wrong answer and we don't want to confuse people. So if you could submit it into the FAQ, Melinda will get back to you after reviewing it. And if she needs more information, she'll reach out. The FAQ mailbox is under registries and STS National Database. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the clinical question request form, ask a question. And just be sure to include the short name and version that you're submitting that question for. Next question, are STAR reports going away in the future? Nope, we're still going to have STAR reports. We just combined version upgrade 2, we combined Harvest 2 and 3 due to COVID and other strains on everybody's resources, and we didn't want to make people submit for a Harvest 2, so we have combined Harvest 2 and 3, but you will get a STAR report for Harvest 1 and for Harvest 3, and that will continue on for adult. In a previous webinar, it was mentioned that there would be a webinar dedicated to insurance documentation. Since there were multiple questions at that time, will this be offered in the near future? Thanks. Yep, let me look at that and see. I want to make sure everybody, Melinda and I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with version 4.2 and some of the changes that happened. And so that's why we were focusing this webinar on those changes. So we'll see if we can do that on the next one. If not, it'll be coming up soon. I can't guarantee that it'll be on the next one, but we will definitely put one together shortly on insurance. For the reason for urgent procedure with 3-vessel coronary artery disease documented in the cath, allow you to code that as anatomy? No. Melinda, do you have anything to add to that? Or would you like her to submit it to, Heather to submit it to a FAQ?
Well, the only thing I could add is that, there is really no hierarchy to the reason, and you need to see what's documented, what the surgeon's reason is for taking this patient urgently. So if that is in fact the surgeon's reason, then yes, you can code that, but it may be unstable angina or an MI or something of that nature. So look to see what the surgeon document says is reason for this patient going urgently.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Is NYH a part of the risk score? Yes, and the New York classification is part. Let me double check before I speak on that.
Yes, it is, Carol. It's part of the risk score.
Okay. We find it under the risk model variable chart. So this is the adult cardiac database collection version 4.2 risk model variable chart. And we're going to look for, they're pretty much in order. Here are the risk factors. And we're going to look for NYH.
It's down further.
Oh yeah, it accidentally got put in the wrong spot for some reason.
That is.
Here under preoperative cardiac status, it's this class NYH 915, and it's used in all of the endpoints for the risk calculation. Does NYHA need to be documented on the same episode? No, it doesn't have to be the same episode of care, but it's, Melinda, what is the time frame for that?
2 weeks. 2 weeks before surgery.
Okay, thank you. And it's closest, if you have multiple, it's the one closest to OR entry, is that correct?
The highest in 2 weeks.
The highest level within 2 weeks. Thank you. Good thing I asked you that one. I got it wrong. If there is an NYH class on the cath report, can we use that? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I would think so if it's in the time frame and it's documented by the physician or the provider.
Great, thank you. Our facility has put the coding summary with ICDs and names after discharge in the patient's EMR. Can we use the present on admission risk factors if listed?
Kelly, the only thing I would caution about that, I mean, as an abstractor myself, I do look at that. because the coders do pull things out that are usually in the chart, but sometimes their definitions of things are different than ours. So I wouldn't say to exclusively code risk factors by that. You need to find that the documentation in the chart and that it meets the definition.
Yeah, I agree with you, Melinda. I think there has to be something that matches that in the chart. Something documented by the physicians. For version 2.9 in sequence 1155, when cath is done 14 months before procedure, can we use what MD documents for disease and say no to cath, or do we say not documented a coronary disease since more than a year prior to procedure? I think we aim for a year, Melinda, but sometimes we make exceptions.
Well, you would code no for a cath done. Okay, so then the issue is the documentation of disease. And if the physician is saying this cath was done 14 months ago and this is the disease that was present, then I would use that, because you still have to put no that the cath was not done within a year, but you do know what the disease that he was basing his plan on is documented.
Yep, I agree with you on that. That's right. I know 2020 has been challenging. COVID, furloughs associated with COVID, redeployment. Have any sites indicated they are not going to report for the first half year star rating period? If so, can you share how many? No, I have not heard from sites that they are not, that they have been opting out for the first part of the year. We did not have the second half, and hopefully it's been a slower time. Not very many cases were done at that time. So it's not, the abstraction load is lower, definitely lower. I know some sites are getting started back up with their programs. Some sites are not. So no, I have not heard from sites that they are not reporting for the first half for Harvest 3. Next question. Since we need physician documentation of NYHA class, why have the definition of each classification in the training manual, since we can't code the class based on symptoms? Yeah, I think that's more of an FYI for you to recognize if you notice a discrepancy between what your surgeon is coding or what somebody else is coding and what's charted. I think, that's a good red flag for you to check into it further to make sure, figure out which one is correct. Also, we have surgeons or NPs or PAs that do the abstraction, so they also use those definitions. Anything?
Yeah, we actually toyed with taking them out, but I sort of did a poll amongst some people, and they said, "Oh, leave them there because sometimes we need to give those definitions to our providers."
Yeah, that's a good point. What happens when the stent is patent? What gets coded? So you have a vessel that is diseased, obviously, because it has a stent in it. But if the stent's patent, then that's 0%. So you don't code anything for any of the. You would code no for whichever corresponding vessel that was part of, if there was no other stenosis within that vessel. What if you have a patient who came in for a heart cath and had 2 stents placed, rested for a couple weeks and came back for the AVR? Do you document the amount of blockage from the heart cath prior to stenting, as that was the last percentage documented, even though they have received stents? There isn't another cath between stents and AVR, as it was only 2 weeks apart, or do you document 0 because they put stents in? No, in your cath report, it should say that it was stented down to, and whatever that percentage that was stented down to is what you would use as documentation. Melinda, do you agree with that or have anything to add?
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. Look at the cath report from the stent, and either they'll say down to 0 stenosis or 20, or sometimes they, only 50. So you need to look at those stenosis from that last particular cath after the stent, and that's the stenosis you're left with prior to your procedure.
Thank you. If a patient, Melinda, are you able to stay on for about 15 minutes? Melinda?
Yes.
Okay. If a patient has a previous stent placement and has a cath, pre-procedure cath, if a patient has a previous stent placement and has a cath pre-procedure, cath documents a native vessel stenosis, but no mention of the status of the stents, just capture the native stenosis.
I would.
Yeah. Yeah, if they don't mention this, if they don't mention the stent and they're only giving you the native, I would capture the native. Remember that native stenosis is going to be outside of the stent area, so it's another part of that vessel that they're talking about being stenosed.
Yeah, most often if it's in the stent, they're going to mention that. If they don't mention it, it's probably 95% of the time not in the stent.
Yeah, just another part of the vessel. If this patient with 2 stents, LAD and circ, were going for a CABG and the saphenous vein and had a saphenous vein to the RCA, can you say the reason for the no internal mammary is no LAD disease? Yeah.
If in fact there's no LAD disease within those stents and the native LAD distribution, yes, then you could say no bypassable LAD disease.
Thank you. So if the surgeon adds on the internal mammary with a vein we mark as a venous graft, then we get dinged for not using the internal mammary. No, that's not what I said. So let's go back and look at that because there's a couple questions in here. I said anytime an internal mammary is used, you capture it at 2626. This is going to give you credit. So even if that internal mammary was used and the surgeon sewed on another part of a saphenous vein or another graft down to the bottom of it, he or she used that internal mammary. So you're going to capture it at 2626. It's going to be a yes anytime that internal mammary is used. So no, you do not get dinged for it because you used it. Going back to the composite conduit, again, another question. Even if distal anastomosis is vein, I still give credit for EMET 2626 if internal mammary was used. Correct. Correct. Yes, that's right. Want to be sure I heard this correctly. Thank you. Yes, Bonnie, that's right. If you use the internal mammary at all, you're going to capture it at IMA used 2626. Yes. I can see problems with my surgeon who want CABG data, specifically IMA usage, even if the distal anastomosis is with the vein. So we don't code EMA at all, even if they put a little piece of saphenous vein on the graft, end of the IMA graft. I'm confused. Yep. No, Beth, that's incorrect. So any part of, if they use the internal mammary at all, you code 2626, yes. Even if they put a little piece of saphenous vein graft on the end, you still code the internal mammary used. That graft though, when you're counting that graft, if you had a saphenous vein graft and then a little piece of, if you had an internal mammary and then a little piece of saphenous vein graft, you're going to code that as yes for 2626. And the count for that, you're going to count that graft as being a distal anastomosis with vein conduit. Will you be giving the aorta device codes to vendors so they can create a drop down in their application? Yeah, we'll be sending it out to vendors. Derek was sending it out today. So he'll be getting that out to vendors today or tomorrow, I think today, and I'll be posting it online, but I wanted to let you all know how to use it before we sent it and posted it. To clarify, a lima to the LAD is yes, 2630 as a distal anastomosis with arterial conduit. If the entire graft is arterial, correct? Yes, that's right. You would capture the internal mammary artery used because you used the lima to the LAD. You did not put any type of composite, any type of extender graft on that. So the entire graft is artery. So you're going to capture it at 2626, and then you're going to capture it as one of the counts at the total number of distal anastomoses with arterial conduits. Do you know yet which aorta fields will be going into future aorta procedure composite scores? No, we don't know. So they are working on risk models for the aorta procedures. I do not know which fields. I don't believe they finalized any fields yet. They're still looking at data and running some analysis on those to see which fields are going to have the largest impact and be statistically significant to those risk models. So they're still working on it. Long answer short, they're still working on it. Next question. Will we have to go back on the aortas we've already done and put the new code in? You don't have to go back and do that, Kelly. If you want to, you certainly can, but you do not need to go back and do that. Melanie, if you're still on, or Joe, if you're still on, does IQVIA need to run on a certain browser, Chrome, Edge, IE, etc.?
I'm still here, and I actually just typed in the response to that question. So it's going to be Internet Explorer version 10 and greater, Chrome version 54 and greater, Firefox version 50 and greater, Microsoft Edge version 38 and greater. We are currently reviewing an issue that we're seeing with Safari. So for those that may be using Safari and having issues with viewing reports, we are aware and working with our product development team in regards to that. And that has been something that we are trying to see if we can get included in another product update that we do. So for now, I would say that the list that I posted in the question and then the ones that I stated, those are the preferred browsers at the moment. We are currently looking at the Safari issue.
Thank you, Melanie.
You're welcome.
Can the surgeon sign up for AQO and purchase all of the sessions for my site? Sure, anybody can sign up for AQO. Your surgeon is welcome to do so. The AQO link, if you go to the STS homepage, I think you can get to it 2 spots. I'll show you under registries and then STS National Database. And if you scroll down a little bit, we have Data Manager Education under Important Resources. And if you click on that, oh, maybe I lied. Oh, man. Sorry about that. Here it is. It's on the STS National Database page. So registry, STS National Database page will bring you here. And then on this page, scroll down and you'll see the Advances in Quality and Outcomes of Data Managers meeting. And this is where you'll be able to sign up for that. We are still accepting abstract submissions. And if you have a QI project that you've done, we would love to see, using the STS data, we would love to see it and put it through as an abstract. I think that would be really great. It's kind of a neat thing to see everybody's QI projects. There is more information down here regarding submitting an abstract if you're interested in that. That's open until the 7th, which is actually Friday, so 2 days away. Next question, when will we be able to see the number of patients by STS category? Melanie, I think that one's for you and your team.
Number of STS category, I guess we need more information. Okay. Where specifically? Is this the dashboard? Because we have a comparison of my site versus the STS. I guess if you can give a little bit more context in regards to where you're viewing this or wanting to view this information, Michelle.
Yeah, let us know what dashboard you're wanting to view it on, and you can reach out to us and let us know. That would be great. Thanks, Michelle.
And also, Carol, just a heads up that I did put the link to this, what you navigated to for the data manager meeting.
Oh, thank you.
So it's in the chat so that they also have access there.
Thank you very much. Next question, can missing variable reports be changed so that they aren't segregated by surgery year, only by version? It takes forever to download missing data reports.
I think we actually initially had it that way. Let me take a look at the enhancements. We had a couple of enhancements that have come in related to changes to the missing variable report, so we can add this to the list, but for some reason I thought we had it that way. But we would need to coordinate with STS in regards to any changes that are done to the report, but we'll add this and review it.
Okay, thank you. Hold on one second to show this guy. Next question, IQVIA. My procedure totals for the harvest summary report versus the data dashboard totals do not match for 2 months I submitted, called help desk, spoke to tier 2, person said who said it was an issue. I did not receive a ticket.
Jenny Anderson. So Joe, I don't know if you're still on. If we have Jenny's name, we can pull up her participant ID and take a look.
Yeah, I'll see if I can search by name through the tickets that we have to see.
Okay, and I'll send you her email address when we get off.
Thanks.
Okay, what is the issue in getting an STS report complete with star ratings and results? So we're talking about the Harvest 1 2020 report, which is data through December 31st, 2019. DCRI completed the analysis on that data a couple weeks ago, and it was sent back over to IQVIA the end of last week, or I believe it was the end of last week. There's quite a bit of process that goes in from DCRI sending all of this data over to IQVIA, and IQVIA accepting that data back and having the right programming in place to accept it back and make sure it goes in the right spot. And then there's the building of the dashboards to display the data. So the data is back over at IQVIA. It's just taking a little bit of time to finish up on those dashboards and get that all displayed correctly. We shouldn't have delays like this in the future. Once we get through this part, it's just because it's the first time with the bidirectional data exchange, and there was a lot of back and forth with programming and things like that had to take place. So that's the issue, but hopefully we have these reports available soon on the dashboard, on the benchmarked dashboard, which will be a new dashboard, and we will be doing educational webinars to help you all with pulling down reports and things. Please explain the difference between an in situ internal mammary and a free internal mammary graft. So in situ means that this is where it's coming down from. This comes down from the left subclavian artery. This is the lima, and it stays connected. It's connected here into this other, I believe this other subclavian artery, and it's connected here. A free graft is when it's used as one of the bypasses from the aorta. Melinda, do you have anything to add to that? That's my understanding, is that when it's used as a free graft, it's more like a vein. It's more placed like a vein graft into the aorta, to the distal portion of the coronary artery that it's bypassing.
When they free it, they actually dissect it. They don't harvest it as a pedicle or skeletonized. It's actually, cut into a piece just like you do a radial artery, and then attached like that. That's your free IMA.
Okay, thank you. We do not have to enter the intubation time anymore, but we do enter the extubation time. Total vent time is not calculated anymore? No, that's incorrect. So total vent time is calculated from OR exit time to extubation time. We never used intubation time for anything. That was primarily for sites to capture that if they wanted to track that. Usually it was captured as the OR exit time, but vent time has always been calculated from OR exit time to extubation time. Next question on that same one, we have to calculate the total ICU time. This was auto-calculated before. No, it wasn't auto-calculated before.
Never.
You've always had to calculate ICU time. Next question, would this case qualify as a benchmark procedure, AVR, MVR, CAB? So no, right there I can tell you that it's a double valve cabbage, and we don't have a risk model for that yet. Normally my vendor software has the risk calculator to assess what category it would be. I'm not savvy at understanding the PRAC ID table. I'm unsure if this would be benchmarked case or not. No, it's not a benchmarked case. So on the PRAC ID table, you'll see, I'll show you, it's that one's pretty straightforward once you get the hang of how to read the PRAC ID table. PRAC ID table is going to tell you what's analyzed and what has a risk model associated. This top dark gray column are the procedures that we have. So CAB, AVR, MVR, AVR, CAB are 4 of them. And you scroll down here and we have the next list. next list, which starts on page 7, is the MVR cab, AVR, MVR, MVR repair, and MVR repair cab. We don't have a risk model yet for a double valve cab, so this would not be analyzed or benchmarked. The ACSD dashboard report. The report is accurately capturing a patient that died in hospital, however, then displaying 0 for operative mortality. Not sure if this is a current problem you are working on. I thought we had talked about this one before, Melanie. These patients, because the operative mortality field only opens up if the patient was discharged alive, died after discharge, and then that's when the operative mortality field would open up, and that's when that count would populate. So I think to get all of your operative mortalities, do they have to? Are we doing something on the? Are you doing something on the IQVIA side? Or are the sites to look at their operative mortality and the died in hospital patients to get their total mortality?
I would need to take a look, honestly, Carol. I would need to take a look. It does sound familiar, but then there's things that are running across all 3 databases dealing with operative mortality in my brain at the moment. But if I could go ahead and take a look, not sure, Elizabeth, if you've already reached out to our support team in regards to this question, but I would like to at least take a look and review to see what's happening on the dashboard and how that's being calculated.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're going to stop here. We're about almost 20 minutes over. I'll go through the rest of the questions and see if there's any I can answer after we get off here. But I really appreciate everybody staying on extra. I know I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm sorry to keep you over, but thank you for staying on. And I hope you all have a great day. Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Melinda. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Carol.
Take
Great,
care.
great
Thank
job.
you.
Thanks, everyone.